Good evening. Thanks for coming. Many of you I know, and my name is Brad Munger, and I'm the acting president of the League of Women Voters of Janesville. That's right, the League of Women Voters encourages a lot of membership regardless of your gender. So we want membership, and there's a table over there as one of our sponsors for you to jump in and join the League of Women Voters. This is an important event for you to learn about some expertly crafted legislation relating to redistricting electoral maps. And you're going to learn a lot about that tonight through this excellent presentation. I do want to first thank the Hedberg Public Library for hosting this event and to JATV for recording our session tonight. Notably, we want to thank Charles Tevel, and he's the Hedberg Assistant Director, and then Alan Luckett, Media Services Director for JATV Channel 994. And we're fortunate to have Alan in the room. Thanks to our supporters, the League of Women Voters of Janesville and Wisconsin, the Fair Maps Coalition of Wisconsin, who we have here as our presenters, the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign, and the Town Hall Coalition over there with Edie Waving. And thank you for the support of our other partners like the Diversity Action Team somewhere around here. And also to the many volunteers, wave your hands, who are jumping in to help us out tonight. And also to our media coverage from the Janesville Gazette and the Edgerton Reporter. So thank you. I believe we also have some elected officials in the room. If you would like to rise and introduce yourself in turn, you can do that.
Just got here.
Thank you, Ann. That's Ann Rowe.
Mark Spreitzer, 15th Senate District.
And Mark Spreitzer. Thank you. Now on to our program. Let me introduce our panel. And as I said before, one of our panelists was unable to show due to illness. And that was Vicki Arrow-Shackmuth from the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin Ad Hoc Redistricting Committee. She's been working on this for a couple of years in drafting this legislation. But we do have our other presenters, Yuseli Flores, who's our Fair Maps Organizing Director, and Nicole Gabriel, Wisconsin Fair Maps Coalition Volunteer and Relational Coordinator. So thank you to them. Please welcome our presenters.
All right. Take it away.
Hey, let's do it.
Do you want the slide deck?
No, that's okay. I actually think I can.
Okay.
My paper.
Let me turn myself off.
All right. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you all. Again, my name is Nicole, and I'm the new volunteer and relational organizer for the Wisconsin Fair Maps Coalition. Thanks so much for giving us your time today to allow us to present on our plan to permanently kill the gerrymander in Wisconsin by establishing an independent redistricting commission to draw our voting maps. Sorry, I don't think my clicker is on. There we go. All right, so here is our agenda for today. First, we are going to discuss the IRC proposal development. Then we are going to dive into just some very, very, very brief history of gerrymandering in Wisconsin. We'll talk about a new day in Wisconsin, so where we're at right now. Then we'll go over the definition of an IRC. IRC, again, just being a very shorthand way of saying Independent Redistricting Commission. Then we'll break down the draft proposal into 3 different sections. And finally, we will discuss next steps. Okay, so this slide here just shows the names of all of the amazing women that have been working tirelessly week by week to actually draft the proposal that we are presenting on today. Now, while I'm very new to this role, having only been here for about 2 months at this point, I know that these ladies have been at this for well over a year and a half, and I'm just so proud to say that their hard work is finally coming to full fruition. What we need right now is your input on that work. Okay, so let's go ahead and kick it off with the proposal development. Experts from Common Cause and the Campaign Legal Center have studied redistricting across the country and created guides for what works best. They found that only 4 states, Arizona, California, Colorado, and Michigan, have truly independent redistricting commissions written into their constitutions. While these systems aren't perfect, they were approved by voters and are working today. In creating a proposal for a Wisconsin IRC model, the League of Women Voters Wisconsin Ad Hoc Redistricting Committee has reviewed these reports and consulted with redistricting experts who had a huge impact on how our proposal was shaped. So here are some of the names of the experts and resources the Ad Hoc Redistricting Committee consulted with. And I just want to take a moment to mention here that all of these sources are available on our website, which is fairmapswi.com. Again, that's fairmapswi.com. So if you'd like to read any of these reports for yourself, you can head over to our website and take a look at the slides that we're presenting today. All of these sources are hyperlinked for your convenience, so you can just click on them and it will take you directly to the source and you can read it for yourself. So if we take a look at the top box, which is experts in redistricting, we will see the name Simone Leeper. Simone is the senior legal counsel of the Campaign Legal Center, and Simone is who we will be hearing from on the next slide.
Hi, my name is Simone Leeper, and I'm senior legal counsel on Campaign Legal Center's redistricting team. I'm very excited to be with you all briefly today to underscore the importance of what you've gathered together to do. I know that I do not need to tell active Wisconsin voters such as yourself about the importance of redistricting. You understand all too well that redistricting can either ensure or frustrate a truly representative government. What you might be a little less familiar with is the reform you're talking about, an independent redistricting commission. IRCs have the ability to take the power of redistricting out of the hands of partisan politicians and to put it into the hands of citizen commissioners. And those citizen commissioners, in turn, can put citizens and communities at the center of the redistricting deliberation and decision-making process. This provides a way to do redistricting right, ensuring a transparent and equitable redistricting process that, in turn, can help guarantee transparent and equitable maps. Now, what I can do is provide some national perspective, a look at commissions across the country and what design features have worked well or maybe could use a little bit of workshopping in future efforts. What I can't do is what all of you can do, which is understand the perspective of a Wisconsinite. You know your community best, and so you all will know best what needs to be incorporated in an IRC to ensure that ultimately the needs of your community are incorporated in any maps that are created by that IRC. The work that you all are embarking on is not going to be short, and it's probably not going to be easy, but what I can guarantee is that it is worthwhile. I am very honored to be a very small piece of this effort working alongside you all, and I look forward to supporting your work in the future. Thank you.
Okay, great. So this is how the presentation is going to flow today. So firstly, when you entered this room, you may have received a physical copy of the draft proposal. If you did not receive a physical copy, you can go ahead and scan that QR code in the top right-hand corner of the screen to gain digital access. Additionally, if you do have a physical copy of the draft proposal, you might want to gain digital access anyway, just in case you want to keep up with the proposal as it continues to develop. All right, so again, we are going to go over that draft proposal in 3 different sections today. The first section is going to include the definition of an IRC, as well as solicitation of applicants, the IRC commissioner requirements, selection of commissioners, and IRC structure. The second section will contain the role of the DOA, public hearings, and the budget. And the third section will be the IRC decision-making process and map adoption criteria. And this is how the Q&A section is going to work. I'm going to repeat some things that Brad already let you know, but just to kind of explain the structure again, for the Q&A section, we are asking you to go ahead and write down your questions on the slips of paper that you should have received when you first walked in the door. If you didn't receive any slips of paper, you can go ahead and pick those up at the sign-in table over there. And throughout the presentation, oh, you need some? Oh, okay, awesome. Yes, yes. And then also our volunteers can also drop them off as well. So throughout the presentation, we will have multiple stops to go ahead and take your questions and answer them. Throughout the presentation, when the section is coming to a close, we'll go ahead and announce that, at which time you can just raise your slips of paper up into the air and somebody will come by to collect them. And the reason we are choosing to go with this method instead of having you verbalize your questions is just because we did try it that way at our first community hearing, and it basically kind of just opened up the door for a lot of long-winded back and forth conversation to take place, with certain voices really dominating the time and kind of derailing the presentation. Plus, this method also allows us to collect your contact information, so we can follow up with you via email in the event that we cannot answer your question right away. Full disclosure, again, one of our presenters, Vicky, unfortunately could not be with us here today because she is sick. She is one of the people that actually wrote the proposal, and we tend to defer a lot of the questions regarding the proposal to the committee. That said, we will do our very best to answer all of your questions today, and if we cannot, we will be following up with you via the contact information on your sheet. What's more, the committee also meets for a couple hours every single Monday, and we read these questions together, questions as well as feedback. So also, if you don't have a question and you just want to submit some feedback, you can use that sheet of paper for that as well. And every single Monday, we meet to go over these questions and your feedback, and we actually use that to inform the draft proposal. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with just a very, very brief history of gerrymandering in Wisconsin. So in 1971, which for context was the year that Walt Disney's Magic Kingdom opened in Florida, was the last time there was fairness and bipartisan cooperation in the redistricting process. Then in 1981, 91, and 2001, lots of bipartisan bickering resulted in various battles within the legislature. We ended up having our district maps drawn by federal judges, and then came 2010, but not so fast, because in 2009, Democrats controlled the governor's office and both chambers of the legislature, aka a political trifecta. Despite this, they did not pass nonpartisan redistricting laws, even though they very well could have. And the reason for that is because Democratic leaders expected to keep winning and likely would have continued to draw maps favoring their party. However, as many of us know, that is not what happened, because in 2010, Republicans gained control of both houses of the state legislature, and we ended up with the Senate election results map that you see on the right. Okay, now the reason we chose to give this simple sentence an entire slide of its own is just because we think it's an incredibly, incredibly important point to make. This quote comes from one of the members of the Ad Hoc Redistricting Committee, Cheryl Moranto, and the quote is, "Gerrymandering is a bipartisan disease," meaning that regardless of who is in the majority, Democrat or Republican, all political parties will gerrymander to entrench their political power if given the opportunity, and that's why we do not want to give them the opportunity. All right, so this slide here just gives you an idea of the statewide mentality here in Wisconsin. This graph shows that Wisconsin voters since 2000 have been fairly evenly split between Democrats and Republicans, and we can see that that split is especially pronounced within the last few decades. And here we are looking at the statewide election results per party. In statewide races, as shown below, we have been fairly evenly split between the two major parties, and which is a much more accurate reflection of how purple Wisconsin really is. However, despite the relatively even makeup of voters, we somehow ended up with a state legislature that looks like this. In the graphs below, notice that since 2010, the legislature has been overwhelmingly Republican regardless of vote count. This is due to those rigged voting maps imposed after the census in 2010 and 2020. For instance, in 2022, most voters statewide chose Democrats, but in the state assembly and state senate, the Democrats actually lost seats, even though they won 3 out of 5 statewide races. So now let's fast forward to 2023. In August of 2023, Clark versus WEC, or Clark versus Wisconsin Election Commission, was filed in the Wisconsin Supreme Court. The Supreme Court agreed to hear the case and ultimately declared the maps unconstitutional based on non-contiguity in December. And non-contiguity just means that there were various districts that weren't actually physically connected. The Wisconsin State Legislature passed the maps that Governor Evers had signed to the Wisconsin Supreme Court in the Clark case into law in February 2024, and we were blessed with a brand new day in Wisconsin. So in this picture, we can actually see some of the members of our coalition here. Carlene Beshin, who is to the right of Governor Evers in this photo, is the chair of the Ad Hoc Redistricting Committee. And to the left, I think in kind of like a tan outfit, is Yuseli Flores, who is our organizing director. And now I just want to take a moment to pause here and say that even though this was an incredibly momentous day in Wisconsin, this wasn't the happily ever after, right off into the sunset moment that some news outlets made it out to see. And the reason for that is because contiguous voting maps can still be subject to gerrymander. And if we don't have an independent redistricting process in place by the time the 2030 census rolls around, we could very well end up exactly where we started. So if you take a look at the legislative election results in 2022 versus 2024, you will notice a very stark difference. In 2022, which is to the left side of the first graph and also to the left side of the second graph, we are not seeing the same kind of purpleness that we would expect from Wisconsin voters because of gerrymandering. However, in 2024, after the new fairer maps were adopted, we're starting to see more equalizing and more competitiveness, which is far more indicative of how Wisconsinites actually vote. So, what do Wisconsinites want? We know that regardless of political party, 87% of Wisconsinites want universal background checks for gun purchases. 86% want renewable energy efforts. However, because of the gerrymandered voting maps, it's been virtually impossible to hold our politicians accountable. We know that to fix this for good, we must take map drawing power away from politicians and give it to an independent redistricting commission to make sure that voting maps are fair for everyone. Okay, so what can we do? Right now, our coalition is working in phases. The current phase, which is right now, is introducing the IRC proposal to you all using these community hearings. After that, we will be pushing for a statute and finally a constitutional amendment all before the 2030 census when the maps are redrawn. So this slide here just gives a more in-depth overview of the FMC timeline. Right now we are in the first phase, again, which is that magenta box, which is hosting these community hearings on our proposal. And please keep in mind that this proposal is a draft. It's not going to be finalized until fall, but when it is, our goal is then to seek bipartisan support and solicit co-sponsorships and ultimately push for a statute. After that, we will move on to trying to cement an IRC into our state constitution via an amendment. Along the way, we do expect legal challenges to ballot access, redistricting, and voting rules, but we are prepared to react accordingly and mobilize our volunteer base to pressure their representatives to defend fair redistricting. Okay, and we just want to take a moment to explain this in a little more detail. So the reason we're planning on going the statutory route first is simply because bills can be passed and implemented more quickly to address an issue right away, whereas constitutional amendments need to meet higher thresholds, such as passing in 2 consecutive legislative sessions. But ultimately, we do need a constitutional amendment to make the IRC permanent and harder to reverse, which is why passing a constitutional amendment is the imperative final step to our plan for solidifying an IRC. Okay, so does anyone have any questions on the history section? If you do, you can raise your slips of paper up into the air. Maybe not yet.
All right. That's all. So that's why we're here for, right?
All right, thank you, Nicole, for that wonderful history. I am a Disney adult, as some like to call it, and so I have been to Epcot and Walt Disney World a few times, and can attest, it feels like you're going back into 1971 minus the 1971 prices. So there were no questions, so we get to really promote the now presenting the draft proposal for an independent redistricting commission in Wisconsin. Now, some of these slides, we will have to read off of them just because they're so long. But what you have either on a QR code, which is the full proposal, or as a handout, it's 15 pages long. So we're going to try to get through 15 pages worth of work in a little under an hour and a half. So an independent redistricting commission is citizen-led, and it's distinct from the legislature. It's not controlled by representatives of any political party, and it's created for the sole purpose of drawing legislative and congressional district lines after every 10-year census. The IRC shall have the authority to draw, consider, and propose maps to the legislature for enactment. Maps shall conform to prescribed redistricting criteria, including the criterion that maps shall not provide a disproportionate advantage to any political party and are determined using accepted measures of partisan fairness. So, who is going to be in the IRC? What does the solicitation of applicants look like? And how do people get chosen for the IRC? We're going to ask people to apply. We expect the DOA to run the process, and Nicole will walk us through why the DOA is who's going to run the process. But they will help spread the word about the IRC and how to apply. The application will be online as well, so think about LinkedIn and Jobs That Help and everything, all the technology that we have to be able to push this out online. But we will also mail applications to 10,000 random registered voters and making sure all parts of the state are included. The application will ask for some pretty basic things. So voter ID, which is what they use for voting, demographic info, age, race, etc., the county that they live in, any party affiliation, including minor parties or none, any work and volunteer experience, education, 2 references, so people who will be able to recommend you, a short essay about why you want to serve. Skills would include being fair, understanding Wisconsin, and analyzing data, and a promise that you're ready to do the work if selected. Who gets cut? People who don't meet the requirements or leave out parts in the application. And the deadline is that the selection must be finished by September 1st of the census year, 2029. So, who can serve? So you must be a registered voter in Wisconsin. You can't be a candidate or elected official at any level, or be a leader in a political party, work for a politician, campaign, or political group, work for Wisconsin legislature or help write laws, be a lobbyist or work for one, be a top-level government appointee or judge, serve on a government board or i.e. police or zoning or the Fire and Police Commission, or that you've donated more than $2,000 or more to any political candidate or a party or a PAC in the last 5 years, or be a close member of a disqualified person. Also not allowed, you can't be disqualified from holding office by state or federal law, or run for office while serving on the IRC. And you must swear to tell the truth on the application and say if you belong to a major or minor political party or none, and promise to act fairly and represent the people of Wisconsin. So, the selection of the commissioners is this still me? Yeah. Selection of the commissioners, so it'll be 240 applicants will be picked. The DOA will use weighted stratification to randomly select people from the qualified applicants. And this group must reflect the beauty of Wisconsin's diversity, race, age, gender, region. And it includes 80 from each major party and 80 unaffiliated, independent, or minor party voters. Step 2, the legislative leaders can remove some. So top 2 leaders from each major political party in the legislature can remove up to 2 people per group. So that's 24 people total, leaving us with 216 applicants that then go back to the DOA. So step 3 is that 9 commissioners are randomly selected. The DOA will randomly pick 3 from each major party, 3 unaffiliated or independent or minor party voters. Only 1 may be affiliated with the same minor party, and at least 1 person from each region of the state must be included. So these 9 people are who will become the first commissioners. So the 9 commissioners select the remaining commissioners. So we're following into step 4. The first 9 pick the final 9. The first 9 commissioners review the remaining pool and choose 9 or more commissioners. Again, 3 from each major party and then 3 unaffiliated independent or minor party voters. They must consider diversity and fair representation, and to approve the second group of the 9, at least 5 of the first 9 must vote yes, including 2 from each major party and 1 unaffiliated or independent or minor party voters. So the final selection will be 18 total commissioners. 15 will be acting commissioners, so they'll be able to vote on maps. 3 will be reserve commissioners, so they stay up to date in case anybody drops out. And then each geographic region must be represented. So why 15 acting commissioners? Well, to avoid tie votes. 15 is an odd number. So here's the structure. So how long do commissioners serve? Commissioners serve until a new group is picked before the census every 10 years. So some job protection will include an employer may not fire, threaten, or, are we here? Yep. An employer may not fire, threaten, or punish an IRC commissioner for serving on the IRC or attending meetings. We think of this as like jury duty. A commissioner's term ends if they pass away, they resign in writing, they no longer meet the basic rules for being a commissioner, or they show neglect of duty, they're not doing their job, or they're acting badly or unfairly, or they just cannot do the job. If folks have questions, we're 2 more slides before we get to questions. So if you want to write a question, now's your chance. So how does the removal work? Any commissioner can request that another be removed for cause. To move forward, 2/3 of all commissioners, not including the one being accused, must agree to consider it. The accused commissioner has 10 days to respond in writing. The IRC then meets to decide next steps, and to actually remove them, a 2/3 vote is needed. They must include at least 1 from each major party and 1 unaffiliated. And if someone leaves the commission, a reserve commissioner will then, from the same political group, fill that spot. Do we have any questions or feedback? All right.
Thank you.
So with 9 regions not dividing counties, how do we ensure adequate representation for Milwaukee County, which has about 1/6 of Wisconsin residents? Other than the Milwaukee region, is the goal for each region to have as close as possible to equal population? Yes. So I think the best way this question is constantly asked, but the best way that we described it was almost sort of like putting a grid over Wisconsin. And then even every region will deserve the same amount of participation, which is when, for example, if only 700 women apply out of the 10,000 applicants. It'll be kind of like a weighted stratification process to making sure that not only people of color, but women, people from all regions of Wisconsin are accurately weighted based on population sizes. Great question. And the Q&A, the FAQ, answers this way better, just saying. So I really recommend you picking up an FAQ or going to fairmapswe.com for that. But that's how I remember it. It was way longer, though. Any other questions before we move on? All right, sweet. And you can always, even if your question refers back to a section that maybe you're like, oh, wait, I wanted to ask this question, you can still highlight where you want that question, and we'll make, this pertains to job protection. So feel free to continue asking questions. All right, we'll be moving on to the role of Department of Administration and IRC staff. So do you want the laptop, or can I just leave it?
That's fine. Can I have that clicker? Thank you. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into the role of the DOA, or Department of Administration, and the IRC staff. So I just want to begin this section by explaining why our coalition chose to house the IRC within the DOA. And the reason for that is because the DOA already has mechanisms in place for dealing with the public. While the Legislative Reference Bureau, for example, is set up to collaborate with the legislature, but not the public. The DOA also already plays a central role in the state budget process and can help incorporate the commissioner's budget into the governor's budget. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with the IRC structure and how it will function. So there will be one lead commissioner. Excuse me, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. So the DOA will get things started by scheduling the first IRC meeting within 1 month of commissioner selection. The DOA will also be responsible for monitoring IRC spending. They will help make sure that the IRC runs smoothly by supporting hiring a chief of staff as well as other members. The IRC will also, the IRC staff will keep things organized. They will be responsible for paying staff, experts, and legal counsel. They will also be paying the IRC bills, travel costs, and other expenses, as well as supporting the lead commissioner by creating agendas and keeping meeting notes and sharing them. The IRC staff will also be responsible for maintaining public records from meetings, as well as updating the IRC website and sharing news. The IRC staff will make sure to publish the final redistricting maps for public review once those are ready. Okay, so this is how the IRC will function. So there will be one lead commissioner who is chosen by the 15 active members of the IRC by their third meeting. That lead commissioner will be responsible for working with the staff to set the agenda, as well as running the meetings, delegating tasks to other members, and they will generally just be the public spokesperson for the IRC. All IRC members, including the lead commissioner, will undergo special training and must attend all meetings unless, of course, there is a good reason they cannot attend. They must listen to the public in hearings and follow laws about open meetings, keeping records, and ethics. Okay, so this is how the public will get involved. There will be 2 rounds of public hearings. The first round will occur before the maps are actually drawn. During this round, the IRC will be teaching the public how redistricting works, as well as asking for input from people about their communities and local areas, because we really want this to be a citizen-led initiative. There will be at least one hearing in each section, as well as in each region, as well as a virtual option for anyone that cannot physically attend. Info shared at these hearings will help shape the first draft of the maps, just like info shared at these community hearings are helping to shape our draft proposal. The second round will take place after the maps are drawn, and during the second round, the IRC will share the proposed district maps for State Assembly, Senate, and Congress. They will ask the public for feedback on the maps, and again, there will be one hearing per region, as well as a virtual option. So, more ways to share. Any Wisconsin resident may submit maps or comments to the IRC, again, because we really want this to be a citizen-led initiative. All submissions will be public records. The IRC must follow open meeting laws, and members may not talk about unfinished maps outside of the public meetings. So this is the IRC budget. Where does the IRC get its money? The IRC will be funded by the state. The state legislator will provide the IRC money, some sufficient to do its job, and some sufficient just means exactly how much money is needed to run, no more, no less. Money is planned during the state's budget cycle, so every 2 years, and that money will be used for paying commissioners for their work, hiring impartial experts and lawyers, hosting public hearings and meetings, publishing notices and keeping records, and handling any legal matters that may arise. How much is this going to cost? So for the first round, we estimate at least $4 million will be allocated. For future rounds, the same exact amount will be allocated, except adjusted for inflation. The DOA will help manage payments and invoices. The IRC will be audited just like any other state agency. And any leftover money must go back to the state after new redistricting maps are implemented, again, because money is being allocated some sufficient. Okay, so that was a really short section. Do we have any questions about the role of the DOA? Okay, that must mean we did a good job. Great.
All right. And I do want to add, that we need your input. We don't know accurately how much a commissioner should get paid, and we're kind of leaving that to the DOA because they know how much they've handled commissions and they've handled payout. But page 11 of the handout, or if you scan the QR code, we did look at other states. So we know that Michigan commissioners in Lessons Learned, they have a report called Lessons Learned. They said that serving at certain peaks of the work felt like serving a full-time job. So we really want to make sure that when they are really actively working, that they are being paid equitably and that it does become a full-time job, that all benefits are still offered to them, because that's what it's going to be. It's not an expected thing that they'll be getting paid maybe $60,000 for 10 years, and for 8 years they're not doing much, and then all of a sudden for 2 years they are. It'll be kind of be based on quorum, so whenever they're called to do the work is when they'll submit those working hours. And so that was one of the questions that we got in the past, but it's under the 11th, page 11, and it kind of will kind of break down. Our question for you was, you know, how much do you think is a reasonable amount for commissioners to be paid when they're actively working on redistricting? So $40,000 was the amount that we talked about for this group, but then a Wisconsin state legislator salary is around $60,000 per diem. So that's a question for you all to say, how much, you know, if you've ever served on a commission or considered or just saw that, we think it's really important that people are paid equitably. And that just bought me some time. So do we have a budget now, and how is it funded? Well, our current goal is $4 million, right? We currently do not have a budget because we also have to leave that open to the DOA, who is going to be kind of quantifying how much this actually will cost, how much it'll work. But our ask is $4 million, and it'll be funded through the capital. The DOA legislative body would be responsible. So taxpayers will be paying this, but it did cost taxpayers almost $3 million in going with the courts in order to get the current maps we have now. So we want to make sure this is put in place forever.
Can I follow up?
Sure.
I guess my real question is, obviously you have expenses today.
There isn't a commission established.
So the work that's being done, is there any financial support?
Oh,
Work that's currently happening?
we need you to donate. We need your money. No, I mean, yes. So the Wisconsin, that was a great question. This is all volunteer-led. Like, these ladies have put in work. We have retired state representatives. We have retired folks who've helped draft legislation, retired attorneys, retired educators, retired teachers, retired workers who are tired, right? That's why they're retired. So now we're just retiring them again by tiring them out because they are now working freely on this work. So this is the first slide deck of where we saw the ladies from the, not all the ladies, but, you know, all the people who were involved are doing this because they care about Wisconsin, are doing this because they care about the work. Currently, the only people that get paid to do this work is Nicole and I. And we constantly complain because all we get is a healthcare stipend. And so we're like, hey, this isn't fair, but this is work that nobody's attempting to get rich out of, right? We are attempting to get the rich out, which is why we're doing this work with the labor in our hearts. We take coach buses, you know, we're not in fancy limos trying to get through Janesville, Wisconsin, and literally our coach bus broke down and they had to tape up a mirror. Like, we are doing this work it's scrappy because we want it to not be so crappy when it hits the hands of the legislative body to make this a reality for us. So thanks for asking that question. If you do want to donate, you can still donate to fairmapsway.com. Our fiscal agent is the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign, and they're all tax-deductible contributions because we're a C3. Yeah, thanks for that. All right, so the IRC decision-making process, most of the time, it'll be a simple majority. So 8 out of 15 commissioners are needed to agree to make a decision. For big decisions like a map, at least 10 out of the 15 must agree, including 1 Democrat, 1 Republican, and 1 unaffiliated. But let's say this switches, right? Let's say we don't have a Democrat anymore. We have a socialist that's a majority socialist. Or let's say we don't have a Republican anymore, and the majority is a Green Party. The way that it's written, although not in this presentation, is that whoever controls the 2 majorities are going to be the ones who will be the ones that will agree. Currently, 1 Democrat must agree, and 1 Republican must agree, and 1 unaffiliated must agree. But that might change in 30 years and 40 years, and that's who we're leaving this work for, correct? Or, I mean, that's who we're leaving this this constitutional change for our grandchildren or great-great-grandchildren. So they'll also get to vote for big decisions, so at least 10 out of 15 must also agree for things like removing a commissioner or hiring and firing experts or consultants. So the IRC decision-making process. So the final redistricting plan, again, it's a big thing. It'll need 10 out of 15 votes. This will be 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and at least 2 unaffiliated. And if they can't agree, each member will get to submit their own maps, or members can work together and submit a collective map. And all maps will get ranked, and then the top ranked map is picked if it has support across party lines. And then if no map meets the rules, or the rule, right, if nobody can agree on a singular map, one will be chosen at random. So then what happens next? The Wisconsin legislature will then review the final plan, and then they have 3 chances to approve it. And if they can't agree by August 15th, the Wisconsin Supreme Court steps in to decide. The adoption criteria. So again, in the full draft, we didn't number these because we think they are equally as important. So we obviously have to make sure that it complies with the U.S. Constitution and federal statutes, follows equal population, follows the Voting Rights Act and Equal Protection Clause. And we just celebrated the 60th anniversary, so shout out to the league for putting so much work at the Capitol then. But we also have to make sure it complies with the Wisconsin State Constitution, and then this one refers only to legislative maps. But nested districts, so 3 contiguous assembly districts in each Senate district. Contiguity. All state legislative districts must be composed of contiguous territory as defined by the Wisconsin Supreme Court as composed of physically adjoining territory, or like Nicole shared, they just have to be next to each other, just something very simple that currently some aren't. Compactness. State assembly districts shall be in as compact form as practicable, and compactness will be scored mathematically using 3 scores. So bounded by county, town, and ward lines, and equal population. This is continued, and this is other important considerations for the map adoption criteria. Communities of interest. So people who live in the same area and share concerns like schools, jobs, even culture, and keeping these groups together to help make sure that their voices are equally heard, and not based on politics or helping any candidate or elected official. Then we have political subdivisions. So the IRC will try to keep cities, counties, towns whole when possible. But we're going to start with smaller areas first. Like if you remember, that got taken away. So we want to make sure that that comes back, where we start with wards and villages and then grow into larger ones. And obviously partisan fairness. So political data will be used for the purposes of ensuring that any redistricting map meets that criteria that's already been established, and that political data is not going to be used to protect any incumbent or give advantage to any political party. And then maps, again, are checked using fairness scores. We're going to be reaching questions, so if you have a question, now's your chance to write it. And then the preference shall be given to the maps that result in partisan fairness. So that's our goal, is to really encompass kind of what is already created in Wisconsin in terms of like the Milwaukee, right? Milwaukee lost a large Latino district, and it was almost swallowed into where I used to live, Walker's Point. And now I feel like our community doesn't get a lot of representation. And so we want to also give people an opportunity to submit their own maps, and making sure that they get to keep their communities of interest together as well. So are there any questions or feedback? All right. So what aids will there? All right. I'm just trying to collate them. Yes. Wow.
Sorry, we haven't really seen
Yeah.
all of them. Oh, no worries.
No.
I think they're different.
Okay, so these 2 are similar. So what aids will the IRC use to draw the maps and the technical data process? And will they use consultants to draw the maps? And then the next one is when hiring experts and legal assistants on these consultants, are these consultants or staff of commission? So we will be using experts. We're not the experts, right? We'd be mathematical experts. That there are already tools that help draft these maps using census data, using the larger community interest survey, which goes out every 3 years instead of the census only being every 10 years. So we'll definitely be relying on consultants to draw these maps, as well as experts who really know this work. And thankfully, we have the internet, and we have tools that can already do this for us. We don't have to, there's not a hand-drawn cartography process going on. It'll be more like data and tools, again, that help with the stratification process of making sure that even everybody is represented accurately. And so, yeah, the staff of the commissioners will then get to pick the correct maps that they think is correct, but the experts will kind of be the ones that offer that legal support. And then if the Supreme Court chooses these maps, how will that not be partisan? Well, we have our hands tied, right? The hope is that the Supreme Court is nonpartisan in the way that they protect the will and the right of the people. And we've lived that since Disney World was established. So we already know how that's going to go. And it's going to be way more expensive as things get more expensive. And so prior to 2011, local municipalities redrew ward lines first, and then these were used to build legislation and then congressional districts. Is the intent here to return to that system, or to have the IRC go first and build those census blocks? No, so I think I might have alluded to that, and I don't think I was specific enough, but we want to go back to that and start with small wards and villages first, and then go on to larger ones to make sure everybody's accurately represented. Great questions. Ooh. And if you feel like I didn't answer your question as accurate as possible, don't worry, we'll reach out once we say, hey, we talked about this and I didn't really feel like I did a good job answering. We'll follow up and we'll make sure that everybody, if it needs to go on the FAQ, we'll add it to the FAQ on our website. The legislative proposal still has the legislature voting to pass the maps that the commission proposes. Is the idea for the eventual constitutional amendment to cut the legislature and governor out of the process entirely and have the first proposed IRC maps passed directly into law? Well, it's not in our Constitution yet, and even then, it is in our current Constitution. I think Article 5 of the Constitution still says that the legislature has to pass those maps. So then we'd have to propose another constitutional amendment to remove that component from the Constitution in order to have a full independent IRC. Yeah, I see a lot of head nods, so okay. And everybody's still awake, which is what we love.
I had that question too.
Yeah?
When we first started this, yeah.
All right, so I think that moves us to
Resources.
Yeah, resources. So I have to repeat this timeline again because it feels like it's right around the corner. And the way I describe it is like, does everybody like chocolate cake? So this is my favorite. This is a 3-layer chocolate cake. And this is where we're at now. So we're still hosting community hearings. Between fall and winter, we do plan to finalize the proposal and then seek bipartisan support among state legislators. I speak Spanish too, so. So then we want to push for a passage of the IRC legislation by the state legislature between winter and spring, because then that'll give us almost the perfect timeline. And again, we expect legal challenges to ballot access and redistricting and voting rules nationally. And I think we're seeing that, and I'm glad nobody said Texas yet, because we're not Texas, we're Wisconsin, but we do expect some of those challenges. And so, again, I can't say more, but more to this, because the Campaign Legal Center report, it's almost 200 pages long, and these women split up these pages, and we went back to these experts and asked them questions like, hey, what did you mean by this in your report? And what did you mean, like, we did our homework, we checked it twice, and we got A+ all around, but we recognize that not all redistricting commissions are made equal, and that's why it's essential that we work with lawmakers and experts and activists and learn from these lessons in preparing our nation's next major cycle. And so this is a landmark report. Again, if you have the time and if you want to read the report, it's a hyperlinked web link here, but they just highlighted everything for us. It's kind of like the cheat sheet, like the smart guy, they're like, hey, I'll pay you $10. Okay. I was the one that people used to pay the $10 to. But they highlighted the key elements of effective redistricting, and we went back with them and just really talked to them. And to this day, we'll still see like Simone Leeper or Yurich Rudensky or Dan Lenz still working into the document and still asking us questions like, hey, I tweet you this because we just learned this. And so we're still just actively building this together. And we want to make sure that everybody's equipped and to achieve a fair representation here in our state. And we wouldn't be anywhere without Common Cause. They also created a report unlocking fair maps. It's a little shorter. It's like 40, 30 pages. But the report just explored key factors that we should consider when creating this. It reviewed other commission structures, which is where we learned that only 4 states truly have an IRC. And that's how we recognize this isn't a one-size-fits-all model. And there is no clothing that says one size fits all that fits all. I'll just say that. So we know that this isn't that model. And Common Cause also held the first ever national conference of citizen redistricting and non-citizen redistricting commissions, because Wisconsin didn't have one, but I always like to pay an homage to Jay Heck, who was there representing Wisconsin and was seeking that more support from other states to help push this forward. And so representatives from 14 commissions across 10 states attended, along with advocates from 7 more states, including Wisconsin. And we always like to give an ode to late Senator Majority Leader Tim Cullen. He was a lifelong advocate for this. And he wrote a book, Wisconsin Gerrymandering, The Fight for Permanent Fair Maps and Why It Matters. And I also have to shout out Colleen and Brad, who had the idea of gifting Tim Cullen's book to the new freshmen. And so we'll be having a legislative lobby day in the future to go and have a constituent from that particular district gift Tim Cullen's book to... It'll be a presentation, right? We don't want to get into the tech. That's like you can't use the word flood when you get flooded. You have to use something else. So we'll be presenting this to freshmen. Sorry, Brad. Thanks for bringing me back. And then if you'd like to listen to the League of Women Voters, This Is What Democracy Sounds Like podcast, the chair, Carlene Beschen of the Wisconsin League of Women Voters Not So Ad Hoc Redistricting Committee was interviewed, and the theme is Mapping Out Wisconsin's Future. You can listen to it on Spotify, and that puts us up to a thank you, and we can answer more questions because we have so much more time. And we already had, I think we have 2 here. So one was, how will the IRC determine fair redistricting maps? Again, they'll be using, and like I said, I can't stress it enough, but we, thank you. We want to make sure that communities of interest are included, that compactness plays a fair role, contiguity plays a fair role. There's currently a lawsuit going on because we found out Law Forward is currently one of our partners who filed a lawsuit because there was some not so much contiguity going on, and so we know where that's at. And we want to make sure again that it complies with the U.S. Constitution and its federal statutes. We want to follow the Voting Rights Act. We want to follow equal population and the Equal Protection Clause. I don't know if you have anything else to add.
I just wanted to point out where it is
Yeah.
here, but I think it's in the adoption criteria, page 13. So we've got. Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay.
If you take a look at page 13 of the draft proposal, you can kind of look at that in more detail. You can see the adoption criteria. It must comply with the U.S. Constitution and federal statutes, equal population, Voting Rights Act, comply with the Wisconsin State Constitution, etc. So again, that's page 13 of the draft proposal.
So does this plan account for any major changes to how the census works, aka what our current president is calling for? So this is why we do expect those legal challenges, and we can't go without naming them. If we don't have a census in 2030, what will the people do, right? How will we get there? And I think that's a question for you all that we all need help answering, because we're on this boat towards justice together, and I don't know how we're going to get there. And I don't think any of us are prepared for that or for what that looks like. And so we need some collective action, which includes why we should mobilize and start calling our reps now before we even get to 2030 and start pushing for there to be a census and assuring that the rights of the populace are respected. Yeah. Any more questions? There was a third one in your okay. Oh, yeah. Huh. Iowa. My favorite question. So I'm going to say this because I feel like I can, but Iowa is very white. Okay? I don't have no reason to ever drive through Iowa, or, fly over Iowa, but it is very white. And it just doesn't represent what Wisconsin is. And although I wish I could pull up a picture of the Iowa model because it looks really pretty, but it's very ugly in turn because it's just locks people in no matter how much the shift is. And there's not much of a shift in Iowa, but there is in Wisconsin. And so Wisconsin's population just doesn't reflect that. That's why we need a Wisconsin model.
I think also the Iowa model, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was developed over 40 years ago, is that right? So it's also just an incredibly old model. So the League of Women Voters Ad Hoc Redistricting Committee was reviewing, more modern models for our process.
Yes. Yeah.
Question.
Maybe Mark or Ann can answer this, but earlier, the way maps were drawn, they would start with local map making. I'm sorry. Thanks. Local map making, and then. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You want to, yeah.
Or ask the question. I mean, we can hear you and we could try to repeat it
Yes,
as well.
yeah, that's true.
No, it's just that in the past, it would start at the local level and go up, right?
Mm-hmm.
They would start to create. So I don't know if it's buried in there somewhere or I just haven't gotten my head around it.
Yeah.
How are they going to do that? Are they going to try to replicate any of that? Because that seemed to me, it's like communities of interest,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, that is a great question. And it is on here. So I think okay, so the question is just like, how are smaller, so back in the day, I don't know, prior to 2011, they started with wards and smaller townships first. And they, people kind of drew those out, and then they kind of they kind of then went to the more congressional, and they went to the legislative maps. And we did add a clause in there that we kind of want to go back to that. We want to go back to building townships first, building, again, smaller wards first, and working our way upwards. I just couldn't accurately tell you where in the plan it is. But we do eventually want to do that, is going back to starting small and then growing. I hope that answered your question. If not, we'll make sure to write it down. Yeah, I mean, this can be open dialogue at our point now. So there is a mic and there's a runner.
I have been told that this mic works and I can bring it to you.
Yeah. Mm-mm.
Okay, I thought that was in there.
If you're trying to make a reflective map of everybody, how are you going to do that? Like, I guess the question is, if you're trying to please everybody, are you gonna kind of like please nobody, that kind of thing?
Oh, yeah. So I think that alludes to like why we didn't want to sort of almost like number the adoption criteria, is because we want to make sure again that it follows communities of interest, that it follows political subdivisions, and there is a component here. So local redistricting process shall occur first. So this can be done by repealing the 2011 Act 39, which requires legislative action, or adopting a shared revenue bill that calls for local governments to redistrict first. And so that will in turn include more communities of interest and will more accurate representation of what the Wisconsin model could look like. And the theme is to include everybody. And the census, traditionally, as we know it, tries to do that. We knock every single door. Before this, I was the census training manager for the state of Wisconsin, so we would make sure every single door was knocked. We recognize that there will be some challenges. To your point about will everybody accurately be represented? No, because less people will want to open their doors due to fear because they see a big emblem that says U.S. government. Why would anybody want to open the door if they are living in fear? So we want to make sure that we build trust in our communities, that the person that is knocking the door on the census is somebody that looks like them, maybe their neighbor, somebody that they know. So we recognize that not only are we presenting on an IRC, but we're going to start to build trust. And that's what we need before we can even get an IRC passed. Any other questions? Yeah.
The part you just mentioned about the Ross, what page were you on of which
Page-
document?
Page 14
Of the actual draft?
of the actual draft, yep, line item, under other considerations, you go to the second point, which is political subdivisions, and then marked 22. So the goal is to repeal the 2011 Wisconsin Act 39. So this is going to be a constant process, even if we do have an IRC legislation in place. And we have, between the legislation and then the two consecutive sessions for the constitutional amendment, to work this out. Any other questions?
Can find our email address. Can find our email address on the website too if you have think of anything and want to email us.
Yeah.
Did you want to go over the website maybe?
We can't because we can't share.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's right.
And it's really hard to make democracy sexy, okay? We've recognized that, we know that, we accept that, but we also know that we can make this work. And I'm glad nobody asked a question about Texas, but I feel inclined to having to say something about that, okay? We're not Texas. We don't have a trifecta. We're also not California, right? That gives us that privilege of not being either one of them. And if you fight fire with fire, there's not enough neosporin in this world to cover all the burns that are about to happen. So which is why we believe that regardless of a party, we recognize that gerrymandering is a bipartisan disease. And I'm also a native Spanish speaker, and the word gerrymandering doesn't exist in Spanish. It means manipulating the maps. So if you are okay with manipulating the maps of whatever party you're a part of, you're okay with manipulating the rights of the people and the rights of voters, which is why we believe that this is not what we want to see in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Yeah.